Now that we know that I is really the square root of -1, let's see what happens when we do some operations with that square root of -1. Now we should all know that if I take the square root of some number, say the square root of 5, and I square that, what I'm going to end up with is the square root of 5 times the square root of 5, which is the square root of 25, and that simplifies to 5. So if you can keep that shortcut in mind, anytime you have a square root that is squared, the square root and the squaring are inverse operations, so they undo each other, and we're just left with the index, which is a regular 5. So what if I took the square root of -25 and I squared that? Well, of course, following that shortcut, the square root of -25 squared would give us -25. But we also know that the square root of -25 would simplify to the square root of -1 times the square root of 25, which would be 5i. So it follows that 5i squared should be -25. So let's see how that works. When I take 5i squared, it's just like any other variable. I would really have 5i times 5i, which would be 25i squared. Since we know the value we're looking for is -25, it seems pretty obvious that I squared has to equal -1. This is actually a really important property of imaginary numbers. So we're going to write it real big, that I squared equals -1. And let's look at another reason why that is. Well, we know that I is square root of -1. So if I square both sides of that equation, the left side gives me I squared, the right side, using that same shortcut, the square root and the square undo each other, so I get I squared equals -1.